Hey there, Penn State fans. Bob Flounders, Johnny McGonigal. It's Wednesday, February 21st. February is almost out the door, Johnny, although we do have a leap year day to deal with. There's going to be a 29th this year, but March is staring us dead in the face. Penn State fans, we got a bunch of Penn State stuff to talk about. The second year players were made available recently for the first time. We had a chance somehow to talk to them, or a lot of them, one way or the other. We're going to get Johnny's thoughts on a couple of the stories he's written, and just some thoughts on that class in general as they get ready for their second year. But Johnny, I am not going to bury the lead. I didn't really realize it until I saw the text from you. I think it was on President's Day Monday. I had forgotten. Did you drive in the Daytona 500? There's a story. I think you were in the Daytona 500, or no, it was a bachelor party that was geared around the Daytona 500, and you were down there for the great race.
I was, yeah. I did not drive in the Daytona 500, Bob. I would have crashed in the. I wouldn't even made it to the sixth lap, which is when the first wreck happened. Yeah, I was down there for a bachelor party. One of my buddies from Delco. A good crew of us went down, and we were disappointed on Sunday. We were staying in St. Augustine, so an hour plus outside Daytona, and we're on the bus about halfway there when we officially get the news. We kind of knew that it was going to be delayed until Monday. A good group of us was able to stick around and end up going to the Great American John on Tuesday. It was a really good time. It was a really good time. It was my first NASCAR race. I'm not a NASCAR guy by any means, but I come away from that weekend potentially being a new fan of the sport. It was a phenomenal time. It kind of reminded me, the fair and the atmosphere around it. Kind of reminded me of Texas, Oklahoma when I was able to go to that this past fall. So really good time had by all. Delco well represented at the Daytona 500.
So many things I could ask you about that, but I do. My takeaway though is, Johnny, when you get a little time off, and you get to be around your friends, and there's going to be like a destination, and you're not maybe in the state of Pennsylvania, you don't get cheated. I was going to mention you got a chance to be at that amazing Texas OU game last year. I think it was on Penn State's bye week, I think, but I know you had a great time then. You got to go to the Daytona 500. I think this could be the start of a beautiful relationship between you and NASCAR. I'm not going to rule it out, but it's a sport that could use a little, I think, shot in the arm. I remember in the 80s, 90s, 70s, early aughts, it was people were fanatical about it. I don't know that that's still the case, but there still are a lot of people, especially in Pennsylvania, that actually the rural areas of Pennsylvania. I don't think Delco is rural, but it feels like it is. But I mean, it's a sport that I think that could use some support. So Johnny, if you're in, I'm in. Maybe you want to rent Days of Thunder with Tom Cruise and a young Nicole Kidman. Robert Duvall's in it. It's one of the weirdest 1990 movies I've ever seen, but it's must watch if you're into NASCAR.
Well, Bob, I ended up watching the Netflix Full Speed. It's basically their Drive to Survive the week before going down, just to put myself in the headspace of one, who all these guys are, and two, just what to expect from a NASCAR race and everything. And that was honestly really well done. If they're just sports fans that want to watch, that need something to watch, the NASCAR Full Speed on Netflix is pretty good. But yeah, so that helped a lot. A few of the guys down there are big NASCAR guys. That helps a lot too. Yeah, we came away, on the ride back, excuse me, we were talking about, going to Pocono or even going to Dover. So if you and Pickle and we can get, some Penn State beat writers.
I think Pickle would be in. I think I think Pickle's not too far removed from being a full-on NASCAR fan.
I don't think we have to twist Pickle's arm too hard there. So maybe we can get a good contingent to head up to Pocono and have a day. But yeah, it was great. It was a great time. Big fan of Daytona.
I did cover some races at Long Pond early in my journalistic career when I was at the Express Times in Easton. One note for any fans thinking about going to Pocono: unless they change the setup, there's only one way in and one way out, so it's like harder to get out of than like a Penn State football game. So just know that you're going to be in it for the long haul if you go to Pocono.
Oh, I mean, it took us because we ended up getting like a Sprinter
Yeah.
van back for the group of us. It took us an hour. We got picked up, of course, Bob, in the Wawa parking lot across from Daytona Speedway.
I'm surprised. I'm surprised you just didn't post up in the Wawa.
We were considering it. I mean, we were in the Wawa parking lot for like 45
That's what
minutes.
Joe Herman would have done.
Oh yeah, no, I mean, of course we had to pop in, make a pit stop, grab a hoagie for the ride back, but it's a crazy scene down there. It's absolutely insane. I mean, they put like 103,000 people in there, 102,000 people in there. The Thunderbirds pre-race,
Awesome.
flying by, doing, one buzz the tower. It was pretty sick.
All right, this is my Penn State transition, Johnny. I want you to grade me on this. I just came up with it on the fly, as I do with a lot of things in my career. Speaking of large objects that move fast, let's talk about Abdul Carter.
Yeah.
How about that? How's that for a transition?
That's a really good transition because he is like a race car when he's coming off the edge.
I think so.
Which is what he'll be doing in 2024.
Yeah. I think we should just talk about that. I think a lot of Penn State fans, it's always funny when they announce these things. And a lot of Penn State people, I shouldn't say Penn State fans, but people who cover Penn State, who think they cover Penn State, were speculating about this move of Abdul Carter to defensive end. And was it crazy? Why would they do it? What's the meaning behind this? Is it who made this decision? And I mean, the guy was 6'3", 250 pounds last year. I mean, you could make the argument for a lot of plays they've used him like a defensive end prior to maybe this year. I think it was a natural kind of evolution physically for Abdul, who's always been a guy that kind of carries the weight of a defensive end, has the athleticism to do so many different things. I do think it's going to enhance his career. It's going to allow him to focus on what he does best, and that's just get after the quarterback. It's a move that I always thought that had Micah Parsons not left Penn State after his second year. If you remember, it was 2020 would have been his third year, the COVID year. He sat out that year to get ready for the draft. I mean, I think that was something that Penn State would probably have done a little bit with Micah for his third year. But Johnny, to me, it makes a lot of sense. It's going to free up. It's going to strengthen a good defensive end room, and they do like a lot of their young linebackers. So I just think it's going to make this defense a lot more disruptive.
Yeah, I think it helps everyone involved. You look at Abdul Carter first and foremost as a player. Mm-hmm. Rushing the passer is what he does best. I mean, he's really good in space. The sideline to sideline speed. And I wouldn't be surprised if, they still drop him back at linebacker sometimes and use him in that role. But when you watch him get after the passer, I mean, there are a few better in college football when he is really turned on and really ready to go and just coming off the edge like that, bat out of hell style. I think he had 11 or 11 and a half sacks over the last 2 seasons. And so I think it just really fits for him in the player that he is right now and projecting what he can be at the NFL. I think that's going to be what NFL teams will want him to do. And so I think it's really good for him personally. I think it's really good for a defensive end room that loses Chop Robinson, that loses Adisa Isaac, has Denai Dennis Sutton coming back, and we've seen those flashes and what he can be, the former 5-star. Mm-hmm. But you look at what else in that room, it's a lot of potential, but not necessarily, it's not necessarily concrete, right? I mean, Amin Vanover, when healthy, has shown that he's a good player. Zariah Fisher coming back from the injury that he had, to fill in a rotational role this past season, I thought did a good job. And we've talked about Nittany Lions, and I talked to Jamel last week, and we'll have a story coming up this week on him and his role and what he hopes for out of his second season at Penn State after showing some good things as a true freshman. But those are still some questions, right? And to slot in Abdul opposite Denai Dennis Sutton, I think you're going to be hard pressed to find a better or more disruptive and more physically imposing
Mm-hmm.
defensive end tandem, in the Big Ten, and you look across the FBS and in the country. So I think it's really good for Penn State's D end room. I think it's really good for Abdul Carter. I think it also shows a lot of confidence and is pretty telling of
Mm-hmm.
what they think about Tony Rojas, because I think Tony Rojas, as a sophomore, will step into that role. Tom Allen, as a new DC, might use a little bit more 4-2-5.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously they used some of that last year, but I think you might only see two linebackers on the field, and
Yeah.
it seemingly would be Kobe King and probably Tony Rojas. And so Tony has made a really good impression on the staff in his 12 months, 13 months, 14 months now within the program. And I think it's a good sign for his development as well, that they have the confidence in him to step into that role potentially.
Yeah, and I do think that when I think about Abdul and kind of in a hybrid role, and I think about what Penn State's defense did last year when they got those three defensive ends on the field at the same time, when they had a healthy Chop and a healthy Adisa, and also Denai Dennis Sutton, they would put Chop in the middle of the field, kind of like hovering over the A gap. And now you have a natural linebacker or a guy that played linebacker who could play that role with maybe Denai on the outside, and either whether it's Jamil or whether it's Soraya or whether it's Amin, you have those three. You kind of have three defensive ends on the field. I think he's tailor made for that alignment. Also, with the way the schedule is going to be moving forward, with the Pac-12 schools who want to throw the ball more, I think they maybe run it, whether it's USC. I don't know what UCLA is going to look like, but Washington and even Oregon with those spread offenses, I think that you want to get to the quarterback and disrupt those guys. You saw what Michigan was able to do. I think you're right. I think really Penn State's future, unless they're playing Wisconsin or Minnesota, which they are this year, is probably in a 4-2-5 look. And I do think that those are the two linebackers. I think Dom DeLuca is a guy that in a pass set might be better maybe in that role. But Penn State's defense is always going to be undergoing changes, and I think that Abdul as a defensive end, I think it's a smart move, Johnny, and I'm excited to see what he can do. I don't know that he needs to get any bigger. He's a pretty big guy. I don't know if he can carry 260. Micah has kind of kept his weight in check in the NFL, but I'm excited to see what he can do. I think it is going to be his best position moving forward. You talked about Rojas, and I know that you've talked to him. I worry sometimes. I really think he's going to be a special player. I worry sometimes that we put a little too, not you and I, but I think the expectations for him are so great in his second year. It would be nice to just let him kind of naturally there's going to be some bumpy spots, but I for the Penn State fans out there, I would give him about a month or 6 weeks, assuming he does have a starting role. But I would just pump the brakes a little bit on him, because he's going to be learning a new defense, or it's not going to be the same defense. Johnny, I hope that Tony Rojas can live up to the expectations. He sure has the talent, but we need to give this guy a little time to kind of get comfortable now.
Yeah, no, definitely. I agree 100%. And that's with every young player. I mean, the story that I wrote about Javen Williams and his prospects and his potential. I mentioned we'll be writing about Nittany Lions, like all of these guys. All these guys who were freshmen last year coming in as sophomores now that are primed for bigger roles. Like, you'll always have to keep your head about yourself and make sure you're not getting too far ahead. But at the same time, there is reason for a lot of optimism around Tony Rojas. And it's not just the pedigree that he came in with. I mean, he was one of the top outside linebackers, in the 2023 recruiting class. But, talking to his teammates, and especially before the Peach Bowl, you're talking to Curtis Jacobs. And Curtis, who I've mentioned in the past, is a great interview, very honest with his assessments about everything, said that he thought Tony was ready to take over, and that he saw throughout the year last year him grow off the field, in the film room, asking questions and taking notes. And he saw a lot of himself in Tony in the way that he progressed as a freshman into his sophomore year. So I just think that you mentioned the sideline speed with Abdul. I think Tony has that. He
Mhm.
has the instincts. He was a running back as well in high school, so he's got the speed and the spatial awareness. I think you want at linebacker. Has made a few big plays already in his career.
Yeah.
You look at the Maryland game, playing a lot in the Peach Bowl. But he's a guy who, as soon as he stepped on campus in winter workouts last year and spring camp last year, made a splash and made an early impression on his teammates, on the coaching staff. And I think that's only continued, throughout the 2023 season. And now as we get into winter workouts with spring ball, a few weeks away now, Bob, I would expect Tony to continue that upward trajectory into being, a starting linebacker for this team this upcoming season. And that's not to, overlook or overshadow. You mentioned Dom DeLuca. There's some other linebackers in the
Mhm.
mix there as well. But Tony seems like he's primed for a big step forward. And there's going to be growing pains, but at the same time, there's always growing pains with young players. And so, I'm interested to see how Tom Allen, uses him and how he takes the Tom Allen's coaching, because Manny Diaz recruited Tony Rojas, and they built a really strong bond over the last year. And Tony said that he was a little hurt by Manny leaving for Duke, but that's the business of college football. You have to deal with that and move on.
Mhm.
And just interested to see how he develops, and the reports out of camp as we look forward to March and April.
So Penn State, Johnny, came out with an updated roster. I think it was last week, but
Yeah.
always interesting to note. What they do is they'll update some weights. There'll be some position changes. Got to pay attention. They try and sneak them past you. But I know that we both took a look at the roster, and I was going to say, especially maybe if not necessarily just the 2023 group that's now in its second year, we could talk about them. But I know there were a couple of position changes other than Abdul. Did anything, whether it was weight gain or position changes, did anything else kind of jump out at you?
Yeah, I mean, just looking at the position changes, obviously Abdul was the headliner. Excuse me, but Mekhi Flowers moving from the defensive side of the
Mhm.
ball in the secondary to wide receiver to a room that we've talked about at length that
Mhm.
struggled at times last season, to put it mildly, and has a cluster of guys there that are really trying to break out and trying to stand out, especially you look beyond spring ball where there are going to be portal departures.
Mhm. Yeah.
Just given the scholarship situation that Penn State has in front of itself right now, Mekhi Flowers making a move to wide receiver where he excelled in high school. Former PennLive Player of the Year in
Mhm.
2020. At Steel High and then at CD East. I mean, the kid had over 200 receptions in 4 years in high school. So
Mhm.
we know that he can play the position. It's just a matter of if he can make an impact at the Power 5 level, at the Big Ten level. And so he'll be trying his hand there, and I'm really intrigued to see how that plays out. Lamont Payne moving from corner to safety is
Mhm.
not really a surprise. He kind of seemed like a guy pegged for that move when he enrolled in the 2023 recruiting class coming from Chartiers Valley, making that switch that Keaton Ellis made, corner to safety. And it's a kind of a luxury move, I think, at the safety position at least, because he's not going to be expected to start or anything. I mean, they're pretty locked in, I think, with KJ Winston and Jalen Reed
Sure.
at safety, with Zaki Wheatley, being that third guy. And then you have King Mack, who, played a good bit at
Mhm.
safety. And more so on special teams, but getting in on defense as well as a true freshman last year, burning that red shirt. So intrigued to see how Lamont Payne develops at safety as well.
Yeah. The one that I was a little curious about, and I try and take the listed weights as real weights, and I know that sometimes sometimes guys will reshape their bodies, and then in the summer they'll take off some weight. But the one I wanted to ask you about, you mentioned safety. So Dakari Nelson, a redshirt freshman from Alabama, now listed at safety at 6'3", 223. So my question for you is that weight coming off, Johnny, at some point? Or should we just put the linebacker designation on him sooner rather than later. I don't know that I've seen too many 223-pound safeties. I'm assuming this is listed as correct. I think he was 203 or around there when he got to Penn State. So he's put on a lot of weight. What do you make of that? Well, first of all, what did you make of him as a prospect? And you mentioned safety. It's getting pretty crowded. But what Dakari Nelson at 223, if that is correct, I know he's 6'3", but that is a big safety.
Yeah, I mean, Dakari as a prospect, I loved him as a prospect. Penn State loved him as a prospect coming out of Alabama, and a lot of SEC schools were on him late, and even Florida State, some of the schools down south were really pushing to flip him late in the recruiting process, and he held firm with Penn State,
Mm-hmm.
and the staff was thrilled about that because they do see a really bright future for Dakari. He didn't make an impact really as a true freshman, but putting on that weight, Bob, is really interesting because you look at what Tom Allen has done in the past. We mentioned that 4-2-5 defense, but likes to move guys around sometimes, kind of in a rover spot, safety, linebacker, and I think Dakari seems primed to be that, or maybe not this upcoming season,
Mm-hmm.
but working in and then becoming more of a real significant piece in 2025. And that's not to say he can't do that this year, but he is a very talented player, and seeing that weight gain, you don't want to make too much of it because it is February, and maybe he sheds 10, 15, once the season gets going, and you never know how that will fluctuate as the months and really days, weeks, months go by. But I loved him as a prospect, and I'm really eager and excited to see what kind of player he turns out to be for this Penn State defense.
It's the Blue White Breakdown. Bob Flounders joined by NASCAR Johnny McGonigal. I don't know if that nickname's going to stick, but it's going to stick at least through the remainder of this podcast. Johnny, we're about 22 minutes in. I teased PennLive's Penn State Tech subscribers yesterday. I said, hey, Johnny and I are going to do a podcast, assuming he makes it back from the deep, deep South. And if you guys have any good questions, why don't you pass them along? We'll pick one to talk about. And I thought one of the questions that caught my eye, I had written something about Cam Wallace, who is a redshirt freshman running back. It's a crowded running back room at the moment, at least for this year. But they have Gatron Allen, they have Nick Singleton, they have Quentin Martin, who looks like he is tearing it up in the winter workouts. It's a true freshman. A lot of people thought he was a top player in PA. Physically, he looks ready. But I had written something about Cam Wallace, but I got a question from Randall T. And his question is, and I know you can speak to this because you wrote something about this. The question is, how come I never hear anything about London Montgomery, the running back? He is a second-year running back. He redshirted from Scranton Prep, missed his final high school year with a serious knee injury, but presumably he's got to be close to 100%. Anyway, Randall T.S., he should be healthy by now. Isn't he doing well? Johnny, I know you wrote about this. I'll let you have first crack at this.
Yeah, I think with London coming in when he did and missing the senior season at Scranton Prep and the severity of the injury that he had, ACL, et cetera, that's tough. That's tough to come in, even if you were fully healthy, to come into a running back room with Nick Singleton and Katron Allen and Trey Potts, who transfers in from Minnesota, is that veteran presence in the room and your clear number 3 guy. I think it was going to be hard for him to make an impact last year, even if he didn't have that injury that kept him out of his senior year at Scranton Prep. And so, to have that, to look ahead on the depth chart and see that, and then to be, actively recovering and getting back to 100%, and not just from like a health standpoint, that your knee is fully ready to go, but that you are, you're mentally good and you are, you're making the cuts and everything is natural. And, that stuff takes time and it's different for everyone. And so I think that definitely played a factor, a major factor into why we didn't see London Montgomery last year. And, to the point of Cam Wallace, I mean, he was a kind of an under the radar last minute signing for Penn State to provide some depth at running back. And, Jaywan Sider, talking to him, I go back to a conversation I had with him last summer, and even talking to him throughout the season. Like, he likes those two guys a lot, and them bringing in Quentin Martin and Corey Smith, the 4-star from Wisconsin, doesn't I wouldn't say bringing those two guys in speaks volumes about like, oh, he doesn't like London Montgomery or Tim Wallace. I don't think it says that at all. But this Penn State running back room, that has built at least recently, a legacy of putting, some running backs in the league and producing some good ones. I think Journey Brown would have been in the league if not for his health, his health condition. Yep. It's just a matter of getting as much talent in that room as possible. And so I'm intrigued to see what kind of spring, London Montgomery ends up having, and Cam Wallace, especially with the competition now from Quentin Martin for number 3 reps. And I still think Quentin Martin can get on the field in the slot and provide some receiving help. That's a long way of saying, it has been kind of like what's going on, with the 2023 running back signees, but because we haven't seen them, but we will, I think, find out more over the next few weeks and, throughout spring ball, talking to some of these coaches about what these guys can offer this team in 2024 and beyond.
Johnny, one thing I noted about your piece, I think you wrote it in mid-October, or specifically you talked to Jaywan Sider about a lot about those two guys, Montgomery and Wallace. Jaywan said, hey, since Cam got here, he's been able to put on some good weight. London still needs to do that. At the time, London was listed at 185. He's only 186 now. I know there's different. That doesn't mean he didn't get stronger, but at 186, I don't know in the schedule that Penn State plays. I don't know if he still needs to add a little bit more size. I think Wallace is listed on the depth chart. He might be at like about 199, something like that. Typically, though, Penn State likes their backs to be, if not at 200 pounds, a little more. Nick Singleton's a freak, and he can play at 225 and still run, 4.3 or whatever it is. But I wonder if maybe London still is in the process of reworking his body, and maybe the knee injury delayed a little bit of that. But I'll be curious to see if by August, by the time August rolls around, if he's not in the 190s, I think he does. If that weight's right, he probably, Johnny, needs to get a little bit bigger.
Definitely. No, yeah, for sure. I mean, you talk about Nick Singleton, Katron. I think Katron's at 220, 215.
Yeah.
So yeah, especially in the Big Ten, we talk about, the Pac-12 schools coming in and spread offense, all that kind of stuff, but you still need to be able to withstand not only the brunt of like the Big Ten schedule, but just a 12 game, regular season schedule. And to be a running back in the Big Ten, I think you have to be north of 200, if not 205, 210. And so, London definitely has some work to do in that area, but that's not to say he can't get that done.
Johnny, I'm glad you survived the Daytona experience.
Thank you.
Good talking with you. No travel issues. Always a concern in February. I hope you're getting rehydrated. That's what bachelor parties do to you, man. I hope you're getting close to 100% rehydration. We have a lot to get to. We talked about this. I just wish that everyone that wasn't just listening to this podcast and they were watching it, because they're missing the visual element of Johnny in his southern fried shades. He's got them on. They look amazing. But Johnny, between draft preparation, between the combine getting ready, sooner it's gonna be here really quick, and they got 10 guys there. Between those two things, I think there's going to be a strength and conditioning availability before the start of spring practice. All those things, pro day, the calendar is going to start to fill up. Penn State fans, we're going to have a lot more to talk about. But we thought we would talk a little bit about the second year Penn State guys, Abdul Carter, and kind of how he fits moving forward. Johnny, I'll talk to you soon. Keep hydrating. Keep wearing those shades. You should definitely wear. If you ever go back to Delco, I know you got some serious Delco roots. I think if you're in this summer, you're going to spend some time in Delco. I think those shades are a grade A fit for the Delco crowd.
That and Delco South in Sea Isle City, New Jersey. I think at the outside at the OD, it would be quite a play.
All right, guys. We'll talk to you next week.